I've said already, I love that one. We raised it and maybe possibly amend our amendment that it was sent out yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. This is Friday, April 18th. Senator Cummings is coming en route, and she asked me to start us off so that we could start earlier and get to our holiday weekend sooner. And so what we have on for 1 p.m. is a possible amendment, a floor amendment to H398, which was drafted before the floor discussion today. So I believe Cameron is going to walk us through what that amendment outlines, which I did email to the committee yesterday, but I definitely welcome a follow-up conversation on how we might amend this amendment to address some of the language highlighted during the floor discussion about an hour and a half ago. Does that work, Cameron, as a setup for you to share your screen? Or
yes, sir. Great. Absolutely. Give me just a brief moment while I get Zoom up.
I feel like I need to speak when there's nothing being said.
Absolutely not. I can keep talking while we're pulling Zoom up. For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. As was mentioned, there is an amendment to 398 that's kind of drafted, and I walk through that with you all, and then we can discuss the conversation that just happened a day ago on the Senate floor.
You want some of these, Cameron?
Sure.
Oh. Hi, anyone else?
Okay.
I had some this morning and sent it to welfare. My breakfast. Thanks for breakfast.
Jelly beans? Okay.
Yeah, jelly.
There you go. Thank you.
So this is currently Senator Chittenden, but I'm hopeful that many of you that are in support of this, and of course the 4 of us don't support this, I will not bring this amendment forward. But I'd love this to be from the Senate Finance Committee if you all over them.
So as mentioned, it's just currently drafted from Senator Chittenden that we can add to. So the first is just 2 instances of amendment. The first one is just a drafting piece that was caught by VEDA after the bill had left this committee. If you recall, there is a section in the bill related to state projects. And they're not really state projects because they're not done by the state of Vermont, and they're not, backed by the state of Vermont. They're really authority projects. And so, we're changing that subheading to name them authority projects. Well, there's a section right below that says state bonds, and they're really authority bonds because the state's not the one doing them and the state's not backing them. So it was just a heading amendment that we missed. So the first instance of amendment is just following in that same thought process and changing that section heading to be authority bonds instead of state bonds.
Wait, is this amendment on our website? Yeah.
It is in your email, so I
Okay.
put it to you right now.
I
emailed you all.
Yeah, I mean, I got it. I just was looking for it on the website.
So that's the first instance. The second instance of amendment was something that was identified again subsequent to the bill having left this committee the first time. And this was a request of the administration. I believe this came through VEDA, so I'm somewhat speaking for them, at least as the information came to me. This is talking about this disaster recovery loan fund that was just discussed on the floor. This is the subsection A that is in that subchapter. And, the 1 here is just establishing the fund. And the 2 is the consultation that we were just talking about on the Senate floor. And the request was from the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation because the original language talked about businesses, including agricultural enterprises. And so the request was wanting to make sure that it was clear that this also included forest product enterprises as well. And to ensure that, so that's the only change to the sub A is to kind of change the language around to just say businesses. And then we're saying including agriculture and forest products enterprises. And then the consultation would now be with the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Agriculture, and the Commissioner of Forest, Parks and Recreation in determining whether funds shall be made available following a disaster event. That's the only change in those sections, is adding
And this doesn't give the head of VEDA the ability to declare a disaster. It says in the event we have flooding like we did in Addison County a couple of years ago that didn't meet the damage criteria to declare a statewide disaster, FEMA eligible disaster. But that for that one, 3 farms or one group is a disaster. Their dam broke and their fields are wiped out.
That is how I would describe it. Just very quickly, I mentioned to Senator Chinden, right off the floor, was that it doesn't give VEDA the authority to declare anything. It just is saying that my understanding is the thought from the House Commerce Committee was there's only $2 million in this disaster fund, not a lot of money. So the kind of check that they wanted to put on VEDA was to say, before you can give any money out, we want there to be some sort of consultation with these other entities to make sure that you're all in agreement that whatever event this is rises to the level of, okay, we think we should expend some of these dollars. At the time, it was, just thinking of kind of commerce and ag. So that's why those two were included. This amendment would subsequently bring in the Commissioner of Forest Parks and clarify that those are also available. So yes, Madam Chair, to your point, I would concur in that. It's not a declaration. It's just a determination of whether funds are made available, and they have to consult. And presumably, as I was saying before we went live, Senator Chinden, presumably the governor, through his secretaries and commissioners, is going to either support or not support the authorization of those funds being issued. What I am doing, I've asked some of my colleagues in Legislative Council to let me know if they're aware of similar funds or projects that agencies make available for emergency purposes that may not rise to the level of a state disaster. One of my colleagues has already pointed out in the transportation context, there are some emergency funds that can be made available to municipalities if there's a certain damage threshold that is met that wouldn't require an emergency declaration from the governor. So this, I don't see the language as somehow usurping any authority of the governor. It's just, you can imagine there being some very localized, weather event. Or one thing that was discussed in House Commerce was, in regards to avian flu instances that are going around, et cetera, that may impact very localized farm communities. That may rise to the level that they want to issue out loans to support those businesses, which may not be a state emergency.
Yeah,
So
a number of years ago, we're worried about army ants who could come through and overnight decimate several acres of land. That's a disaster to the 2 or 3 farms, or Franklin County or Addison County, where they eat all the corn, but it probably doesn't rise to the level of being a statewide natural disaster. And I can remember the milk prices dropped and they were closing dairy farms. We authorized VEDA and actually put money in. That was a disaster to the farming industry. It's a different context of disaster.
Well, so we were having this conversation before we went live about this language, and I was trying to come up with a different word than disaster so that there wouldn't even be kind of the confusion or implication that this is the same thing. So on line 18, following a disaster event, instead of saying a disaster event, I had suggested something else, but it could be weather event, but that wouldn't necessarily cover the avian flu example that Cameron just gave. So, I had also suggested emergency event, but some people thought that would imply a different something else. So,
We need a synod.
Yes, so.
Looking it up right now.
I don't know if there's something else that is, but you had said, Senator Chittenden, that there's someplace, and I was just trying to find it in the bill that says that this is specific for natural disasters. Is that true, Cameron? Is this loan fund specific for natural disasters? I caught you eating the jelly beans. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think that may have actually been a phrase that I used was natural disaster, and I apologize because now that I'm reading the language again, it does just say
After disaster,
disaster.
yeah.
Right,
Say
so,
that.
so it could cover something like the avian flu if a farmer
Mhm.
lost all of their turkeys or had, or whatever to the avian flu, that could, they could try to get a loan to this.
And I may be recalling what the language originally said in the House, wanting to take that out to make sure that it could be read more expansively.
Okay.
Maybe where my brain is at. Right now, it is just saying disaster.
Yeah, so we don't want to say weather event, but
And we might want to say a disaster that it doesn't rise to the level required for gubernatorial declaration.
how about a
there's the-
non-declared
Here's
disaster event?
non-declared disaster.
Well, there's the clear distinction in two, which says that, you have to consult if they're in the event of an event. If there is a declared statewide emergency or by the president or the governor, we don't need a consultation anymore because it's clear that
There's a
whatever
disaster.
event that is meets a threshold that we would want money to be available.
How about we just say a non-declared disaster event, which is
We
awkward,
could just
but
have the pro tem that no, we are not declaring a disaster over and above the governor. It's a situation that is a disaster to some smaller group than.
A non-disaster declared urgent event.
Can I just throw out some
Leave it,
synonyms?
we got making it.
We got crisis, calamity, difficulty, accident, predicament, catastrophe, plight. There are a lot of
Would you want me
words.
to go across the hall and get from Pat?
no, I actually don't.
I sent an email to him this weekend with whatever Cameron comes up with and we could see if he
No,
wants.
you're not declaring a disaster. This is more a localized, if it doesn't meet the level of a statewide, because to do that, there has to be a certain amount of damage, monetary amount of damage. There has, in a certain area, and there has to be public infrastructure that's damaged. There's all kinds of,
Localized crisis. You don't want to change the word.
I don't care. I mean, I just think, I'm not sure we need to change the word. I think we got him an answer. If he doesn't like it, he can bring in a.
Maybe we can leave Ledge Council to look at this over the weekend before Tuesday morning and give us your thoughts and if we should change it to be consistent with other statutes.
And I'll check with the
Yeah.
team. My personal immediate reaction would be reluctant to move away from something like a disaster. Yeah, because I think, some of these other words, I think you're just potentially adding more ambiguity. to
Right.
it. It's going, and if you don't change the structure of this, it's still going to be up to those four, if you add this amendment, those four entities to make the determination. I would be more than happy to speak to the pro tem in his office, see if, eventually alleviate any concern there.
I mean, I can,
The disaster, whether designated or not.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of trying to get at.
an undesignated, in the case of an undesignated disaster.
I mean, you could change
The
just
authority
that and
to-
that, you could just add right here to try to make it.
Yeah.
It would alleviate some
undesignated.
concern of just saying, as was mentioned previously, Senator Brock just brought up again. You could say in determining whether funds shall be made available following, non-declared disaster event.
Yeah. I think that would do it. They're not declaring a disaster, they're just saying something bad happened. We're talking $2 million here, that's gonna pave about 3 feet of sidewalk, right? It's not a lot of money.
Pave about 3 feet inside. Do
I'm gonna use the avian flu people. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you want to sign on to my avian flu resolution? I'm moving out of the room.
Yeah, because I don't want to get it, if we start diluting too much, you get down to the fox got into my hen house. And now I want the state to buy me a new flock of hens. And I don't think that reaches the level of a disaster. Except for the individual whose chickens are gone. But,
So you're gonna put non-declared in there?
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, okay.
And then I'll seek confirmation that you're all on board for this. Add your name.
Trust me. Just going.
Yeah, all right. You can say, or I can stand up and say, we had extensive discussion.
Oh my gosh.
And we concur.
Oh my God,
We
yeah.
worked on synonyms, antonyms. Yeah. We have
49
concurred all except Senator Maddow, so.
You
We'll
want me to get her back in? Do we have
Was
to
he
vote
here
on
for
this?
part of it? No,
He was here for part of it. I think he left when
This
it
is-
got complicated.
yeah, no, we can't do a committee amendment anymore, so,
Wow.
Senator,
There he is.
there he is.
Yes.
We were just gonna, we can't do a committee amendment, but we've decided on adding undesignated before disaster right there,
Undesignated.
Or non-declared.
non-declared,
Non-declared.
Yeah.
okay?
Just so it doesn't have to be like a state of emergency type disaster.
Well, yeah, small dam breaks and floods 5 farms or 3 farms.
Small disaster.
Or the South Burlington.
Yeah.
Any place except for South Burlington.
But I don't know
Okay.
how.
Okay, so
But I leave it up to them. That barn that burnt that killed 100 pieces of livestock on last weekend in Barrytown is. For them, that's a real disaster. And maybe Vita would like to give them a loan. I have no reason to think that Vita is irresponsible.
Can I bring it forward with all of your names on it?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Please.
Okay,
Ready
That
not
made
see
you-
a no, so I will be adding everyone's names to the amendment.
we are all on board.
And I
All
will
right.
just list them alphabetically unless anyone has a.
Or throw off.
I think they'd like to see whoever can speak to it first.
Reverse alphabetically.
Yeah, it's technically his.
That works. Have a wonderful weekend.
Yes,
If you do not need me for anything,
no,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
it's starting to cloud up, so go out and enjoy the weather before it starts to rain.
Breaking down.
I will fill my cup up before I go.
Too
Definitely
long.
that. It's just turning out the substance.
Oh, that's not
Percentage.
Oh, that's sad.
But I guess the flavor before you do. How do you know if you're right though? Chief.
Can I go a point of personal privilege? My grandson was admitted to the Governor's Institute for Engineering as of yesterday.
very cool.
So then what, the governors, who runs that program?
It's the Governor's Institute. My daughter went to
It's
the
a nonprofit
one for
organization.
art. It's nonprofit. I didn't know they did anything. It's
They're great.
technical.
Yeah,
I know
they
the
really are.
art one was.
Is that like a summer program?
Yeah, yeah.
My daughter
I think
does
it's-
the engineering one too.
Yes, we should go offline. Thank you. We have 10 minutes. Secretary